and welcome to another episode of the Empowered CPA podcast. I am your host, Dawn Scott. I have been constantly receiving questions and inquiries and people reaching out after some of my prior episodes to get some clarification on some of the amazing topics that we've covered so far. So today I really wanted to take an opportunity to do a deep dive into kind of the life cycle of a business. I know a lot of people who are listening are probably in the beginning stages of their company and then moving towards their goals. But sometimes it helps to have some amount of a roadmap or some clarity on what happens next. So I really want to dive into what that all looks like and really just use my experience as kind of an example. It's the best I've got. So the first thing at any business, right? You decide to make the big change. You decide you're going to leave whatever you're currently doing and start out on this journey of entrepreneurship. And you take on anything and everything that possibly comes your way. There's a scarcity mentality. You're like, what if I don't take this? Am I going to be able to pay my rent? And so you find that you aren't necessarily thoughtfully taking on people. You're doing it more from a position of, if I don't do this, will there be somebody behind you? So what happened is you probably take clients that if you were a little further along in your career, you wouldn't be taking because they're not a good fit or they're not, they don't appreciate your services, that type of situation. And so you find that you're working probably more than you did before you left to go on your journey and you're not as happy as you anticipated. So example of that, when I started, I left corporate America, I left, firm life, and I was accustomed to working pretty crazy hours by societal standards. It was just part of what we do. It's part of the schooling. It's part of the coming up through a firm and a big company. And it's honestly just normal. And so that's what I was accustomed to. So when I said, I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to do all these things. And then it wasn't 60-hour weeks. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I thought, am I doing it wrong? What am I doing? And I was really setting out on this new journey that didn't have a lot of people before me in terms of how I was trying to run my practice. And so I didn't have a lot of people to look towards. And so I was honestly taking anything and everything that came my way. And what I was finding was it wasn't any different than it was when I was at a firm as far as like my enjoyment of what I was doing. And it was scarier and it wasn't as dependable and the people weren't appreciative. And I found myself really questioning kind of what I was doing. And that's a question that I've had several people reach out to me recently after, listening to these podcasts. And they're like, how do you know when it's going right? And it's like, well, I don't know, that's different for everybody. But for me, the moment I realized it was going well was I was working hours that were probably still crazy by a lot of people's standards, but I was really enjoying the people I was with. And I was really enjoying the work I was doing with these people. And that was kind of a turning point in my journey where I was like, okay, well, I'm still working a lot and that doesn't bother me. That's just kind of my DNA. But I had a lot of joy. And so I started analyzing what changed from when I was first starting and I was taking everybody and I was doing all these things and I was working with people that didn't really maybe appreciate what I was doing or, didn't like the prices, that's a whole nother thing we might get to today. But what changed? So for me, what changed was I sat down and I said, what do I want my lifestyle to look like? And that conversation is different for everybody. I, at the time, had small children. They're still pretty small, but at that time I had very little people. And one of the things that caused me a lot of stress when I worked for someone else was my little ones would get sick because they're little and they're, in various childcare situations. And so they got sick a lot. And so I was stressed because as a mother, my child was sick, but then I was stressed as an employee because my employer was mad that I wasn't there and it was never a convenient time. Kids never get sick when it's convenient. That's just the law of nature. And so I was stressed on all of these fronts. I felt like I wasn't being a good mother and I felt like I wasn't being a good employee and I felt like I wasn't providing to my clients what I wanted to provide. And so I was just over committed and I wasn't doing anything well. And so for me, the main driver of my business was to ensure that as long as I could get my work done, which is, that's very important. As long as I could meet my deadlines, it didn't matter if I was working from 9 to 5 or if I was working sporadically 3 hours here and 3 hours there. And as long as that was being accomplished and my things were getting handled and my children were being, nurtured the way they need to be nurtured, then that was probably going to be okay. So my first checklist item was, I want to be able to be there for my children, wholeheartedly show up for them when they need me. So sometimes that means when they're sick. Sometimes that means volunteering in kindergarten. Sometimes that means chaperoning a field trip. Or, sometimes that just means helping them with their homework when they don't understand some math, because I suck at English, but I'm pretty darn good at math. So that was really the first item to me, was everything I take on, I'm going to be taken away from my children, because that's how it works, right? And I wanted to be sure that I was able to manage the workload that I was bringing in, but still manage to be the mother and partner that I wanted to be. So I looked at that from kind of a time constraint point of view. I never wanted to take on more work than would allow me to be flexible within that set of constraints. The second thing that I really realized was there is a certain type of person that I enjoy working with, a certain type of business that I enjoy being around, a certain type of person. And those were the type of people that I wanted to work with on a daily basis. Those were the kind of people that I wanted to spend my time with. And I, as a business owner, had the ability to say no to people. And that perceived power, whether it's real or perceived, still not sure. That set of power was life-changing for me. I can tolerate so many more things knowing that I'm in control. If at some point I get to a point where I don't want to work with you anymore, I can say no more. And that power to me really was a game changer. So identifying who your target market is so important. And when I started, I don't think I knew what that target market was. I think I was like, all small business owners. Well, there's a very wide range of people within that small business ownership community, and not all of them are good fits for everybody. And that was a hard lesson for me. I am somebody who's insanely competitive, and I love a good challenge, and the harder, the better. And if it's never been done before, sign me up, because I'm your gal. And what I realized was, not everybody's a good fit for everybody, and that's okay. Sometimes it's important to just say, yes, I have the technical skills, but our personalities and our expectations and the relationship that you're looking for does not fit into my practice or my business or my whatever it is you have. And that's okay. And that was really hard for me. And I learned that lesson the hardest way possible. I took on a client who still has the most incredible business, one of the most incredible businesses I've ever been a part of. It was super fun, definitely in a space that was a big part of my lifestyle. And the staff was amazing. They were hard workers, great people, super educated, did this just amazing thing. The clients were super powerful people. And it was, in theory, the best thing ever in the entire world, except for the person that I had to report to, the person who was in charge. Him and I did not get, our vibes just are not compatible. We're just not compatible people. And I had that feeling after our first meeting. I was like, this guy, we're not really compatible. His personality is not compatible with mine. And that's fine. But I took on the competitive side of me, didn't listen to the heart side of me when it said, I think we should walk away from this. My competitive side was like, we got this. I can change this guy. And we all know, ladies, we all know we don't change men. So I went down this path, and I will tell you that I probably lost several years off my life trying to make this work, because 95% of it was so incredible and so perfect. And that other 5%, I just couldn't get over. I could not handle, nor did I want to handle, the relationship that we had built together. And so it came to a very heated, very explosive end, which is not in my nature. I am, even though competitive, pretty darn easygoing. And so I promised myself that I would never, ever, 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 so long as I live, put myself in that situation again. So I took some time to reflect on that and said, these are the parts of this relationship that I loved. And there were plenty of things that I really loved and appreciated and made me grow as a person. So I'm grateful for that. But then there were things that I could have avoided, and I could have made sure that I didn't put myself through that. And so I sat down and said, these were the red flags that I saw originally. How do I mitigate that in the future? How do I identify that? So the next thing that I did to really design the business, the practice that I wanted to design, was I put in place this amazing onboarding system. I have people reach out to me pretty frequently. I'm very lucky like that. Wanting to work with me, which is such a blessing. And I can't even tell you how honored I am for that. But again, not everybody is a good fit. And so I start every response back with, I'm so thankful you've reached out. Thank you so much. Here is my pricing sheet type thing. This is where my prices start, because we could be compatible and we could be the best fit in the entire world. I could help you move mountains, but if you can't, if I'm so far out of your budget that it's just not even possible, then what are we doing, right? And that was hard for me too, because I wanted to help everybody. I mean, at one point my husband asked me if I ran a not-for-profit. So that is just something I think, especially as a female founder, we deal with, is pricing is really hard. And we'll talk about pricing way more in depth later, because it is such a sensitive thing. But that's my first thing. So I said back, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Here's a little bit about me. Here's where you can go to find me. But here's where my prices start. And if you're great with that, then here's a link to schedule a meeting with me. I will tell you that if somebody is not willing to go through that process, for me, that is not someone who is going to be a good client for me, because while I don't need a lot of interaction generally, I need you to at least be open to doing that. So that weeds out some people, and that's fantastic. It weeds out people who aren't interested in having a phone call. A lot of people are like, well, you're just an accountant. You do this, you do that, you do that. And yes, I am an accountant, and yes, I do X, Y, and Z, but I have built a practice that is a relationship-based practice. And so that is something that is important to me. And so putting that in place has been amazing, because we weed out for prices. So if you're not there, then you're not there. And then you know where you are. So if you want to come back later, that's fantastic. If you're not willing to put in the effort to have that initial interview, then we're probably not going to be a good fit either. And then I'd say 95% of the time, I do actually make it to that interview where we just chat. And it's honestly, tell me about yourself, tell me about your business, what are you struggling with, why are you here, how'd you find me? And in that, I can tell nearly immediately if we're going to be a good fit from a personality perspective. And that's all I'm looking to derive from this. I'm looking to make sure that you have some passion in what you're doing. You are loving what you're doing. You're volitionally needing help. You're seeking out help because you know that there's this hole in what you're doing. And so for me, that is the time where I decide yes or no. And I've even had instances where recently I had someone come to me who came from an amazing resource, very good referral source for me, amazing woman. It's a really good friend of hers. And there's just something that, and I can't still probably put my finger on it. I just knew we weren't going to be a good fit. And so I made that decision. I said, I appreciate your time, but this just isn't going to be a good fit. And while at the time I didn't know why, the response I received back told me everything I needed to know and proved to me that my process is working, because I said, here's a list of people who I think may be able to serve you better. I wish you all the luck in the world. And she wrote back and said, well, aren't you an accountant? Isn't this what you do? I'm sorry, did I ask you to do something that you don't do? I was like, well, no. But I have the power to not work with people who view me like that and who talk to me like that, especially in the beginning. And so while at the time I wasn't certain of why I felt that way, that response back was everything I needed to know that I had indeed made the right decision. And so from there, we make sure we're a good fit. We make sure that our personalities work out together. And that's how I weed out 99% of the people who would eventually cause me a lot of grief. And listen, I'm not perfect. I don't get it right every single time, but this process has worked for me. So for you, what you would do is think about, what does your lifestyle look like? What are you trying to accomplish from a time perspective? And I know it's hard in the beginning when you're like, well, I need to get as much money in as possible because I have rent to pay. And I know I get it. I've been there. But the more you can put these in place early, the better practice or the better business you're going to develop, because turnover of customers is so expensive. And while it may work for the short run, it's not going to work long term. And that is really what we're looking for, right? We're looking for long-term success. We're looking for long-term happiness. And if we just wanted to work with people we didn't like, we'd go work for somebody else who just told us what to do. And I don't think any of us are trying to do that anymore. So really identifying who your target market is, how you want your business to look. Do you want, some people like to work a lot, right? Like, do you want to be working full time all the time? Schedule accordingly. Make sure that's make sure that that's how you're building your practice, but build it with like at least the 2-year plan in mind. Like, think out long-term, like, what do you want this to look like? And then from a financial perspective, so you can have, I read this thing in one of the groups I'm in. This girl is, again, we work a lot. She's working 90-hour weeks during tax season. It's a lot. So I actually did the math on that. It's over 13 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't know about you, but my brain turns off well before that time frame. And that's just not sustainable. And while that may be sustainable for her and the money may be what drives her, that is not something that I'm looking for in my practice. And so I actually had this conversation with a client the other day. He said, "Oh, I know it's your tax season. It's super busy. You must be working 14-hour days." And I said, I stopped taking new clients a couple of weeks ago. He's like, "Well, what do you mean? That's a lot of money you're giving up." And I said, you are correct. It's absolutely, financially, I could definitely be pushing myself more to do that. But it's not the lifestyle I want, and it's not the business that I want to run, and it's not how I want my employees to feel. I want to be a mindful employer, and if I'm making my employees do what I used to have done to me, that is not the business that I'm looking to build. And so I just said, I hire very thoughtfully. I hire very slowly, because I want to ensure that if I give something to somebody, they can provide the same level of service and the same level of a relationship that I would be able to provide. So I just said, I laughed back and I said, well, if you would like to talk to somebody who is completely, maybe not me, but maybe different and maybe not as technically sound and maybe not as fun to work with, I'm happy to keep taking on new clients. But part of the allure or part of the enjoyment of working with me is that my practice is very different than a normal accounting firm, right? And that's something I'm really proud of. And so I've built this company with that in mind. And so when I decided to start doing digital content or this podcast even, I had to say, these are the time constraints that these new projects are putting on my schedule. So what do I need to do? And I did it in a very thoughtful way to ensure that I'm still providing the service I want for my firm clients, but I'm able to reach other people in other ways. And so for me, I sat down when I decided to make this decision. I said, I really, really, really want to reach more people. And I feel like there's such a shortage of understandable content in my field. How do I reach more people, but still maintain this life and this time balance thing that I'm trying to protect so fiercely? How do I do that? And so that was how I made the decision that I need to stop taking new clients in my private practice. I need to just really focus on the amazing people that I have there. And then I'm able to reach even more people in a time constraint that works for the parameters that I've set up for myself in the podcast or the digital content that I'm creating. And so really, everything you do as a business owner, as much as humanly possible, needs to be done from a very calm conversation with yourself. I love having these conversations. Myself and I, my cup of coffee, and we just talk about what is working. I think about the stress that I have. Is there a way to relieve that? It's not always possible, but is there something that I can do to make something easier or free up some of my time somewhere? And then that's where things start to grow, right? We look at, I'm doing all of these tasks. Is there something that I can hire for or outsource in a way that will allow me to open up my time to provide more services to somebody, but still provide that level of service I'm looking for. So for me, the answer this past year was I'm going to hire an administrative assistant who has changed my life. She is, most the reason for my sanity. And I've been able to give her a lot of these tasks that were easily delegated, but still something that would allow me to have the high touch point that I want in my business. And so what I found was this is kind of the most frequent first hire that most businesses have. You either first hire a VA or a physical, like I did, a physical assistant, or you hire a bookkeeper. And these are both really, really good places to start. And so for me, I have the bookkeeping under control. I know a thing or two about that. So the obvious choice for me was to hire an assistant. And so that's going to be probably your first kind of fork in the road as a new business owner is what are the tasks that you just can't stand doing? I do not like invoicing, ironically, and I do not like my engagement letters, and I don't like uploading all this crap into the CRM that I have. And I'm not great at it. It's not something that my time is best used for. And so I hired someone who is really, really good at that, and she really likes doing that. And it frees up hours and hours and hours of my time. And so by doing that, yes, I am paying somebody, but I'm also increasing my revenue because I'm doing things that are generating more money while she is doing things that really just kind of bogged me down physically and mentally. So that is something to consider. The other thing is, are you a business owner who is spending 10 hours a week or whatever doing your bookkeeping, and at the end of the day, it's all wrong and you're like, screw it, I'm just not going to do it? Then maybe a bookkeeper is a good person for you. Do you hate paying your bills? Do you hate, trying to figure out what's in your account? And if people are paying you, then a bookkeeper is a really good option. And I even have clients who I pay all of their personal bills for, because for them, they have anxiety or they have adult ADHD or they have some reason why that just interferes with their life at such a high level that me taking that off of their plate, it makes them better at everything they do. So really some self-evaluation in what parts of your business are you looking to get help with. That's going to lead you to your first hire. And then that's how you grow. And so at this point, and I had this happened to me very clearly, where up until I hired my first hire, everything was in my brain. My brain is kind of a scary place. Anyone who knows me can agree to that. And I have several clients who own 3 or 4 businesses, and their CRM name is under their personal name, but I know they have like 4 businesses. And so I had to sit down, which was a very humbling experience for me, and explain to somebody everything that was in my brain, and I had to get it out. And I had to do some organization, because no matter how good you are, you can't do everything by yourself. And so when you're initially setting all these things up, if you think about the systems you're setting up while you're doing it, to eventually be able to hand it over to somebody else, you will thank me greatly. So I literally had several sit downs where I was like, okay, here's my client list. Let's go through the CRM to make sure that when you're doing invoicing and you're doing, engagement letters and you're trying to upload all these things to all these places, you understand who is who, because I do deal with very sensitive information. So that was something that I was probably not as mindful of. And this may not be applicable to you if you aren't in this kind of space, but always think about, if you were to hand over what you're doing to somebody else, is there enough of a path for them to where they'll be successful? So really thinking about that, because you can't grow if you're always doing everything yourself and everything is contained in your brain and everything is, so Fort Knoxed that you can't do that. Right. So then I think where a lot of the questions that I've received from prior episodes of the podcast were, how do you go from being yourself, like just you or a small business or just starting out, to, I was talking about how we plan for this growth. And then it was in Megan's podcast where we talked about, we built her and we built her and we built her. And 5 years later, we had built this amazing business. It's beautiful. It's thriving. It's doing so incredible. And now we're tracking towards her next 5 years. So a lot of times what happens is you work so hard and you work hard every day and you are in it and you're slaying it and you're doing great. And then you wake up one day and you're like, I'm not sure this is where I want to be. And that's some feelings. I mean, to really sit down and think about that's heavy. And so having the ability to step back a little bit and say, have I built what I'm looking for? Have I built what I wanted to build? And we all go through seasons in our life, right? Like, especially if you're a young family and you have some commitments for a young family. And then as your kids get a little older, then maybe things get a little different. And then as your kids get even older, I don't know, but I think they get different again. So really just knowing that this flexibility needs to be in your business. And so having those evaluations, I have some clients who are like, Dawn, I am happy with where I am. I want to be able to stay where I am. And so we plan that way. We make sure that you're not taking on new clients. For me, for example, I am so pleased with my practice. I am temporarily not taking new clients because I am happy with where that is. I am looking to scale these other items. And so if I continue to take on new private practice clients, I'm not going to be able to focus on these things over here. So really being mindful. And I remember the first time I wrote back an email saying, I'm sorry, I'm not taking new clients. It was the strangest feeling because it's like, that's so much money walking out the door. And am I making the right choice? And oh my God, like, ugh, and so for me, I combated that with saying, hey, I'm not taking new clients, but I do have a wait list. If you'd like to be placed on the wait list, let me know. And much to my surprise, everyone's like, yeah, put me on the wait list. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So for me, identifying where I was, what I was happy with, and where I'm trying to go in the next 5 years. So I am looking to really develop this community and this podcast and this digital course series where I can help so many more people. And by taking on new clients, I'm taking away from that. And so I had to put a hard line in the sand and say, this isn't it. This is what needs to be done to get to where I want to be. Now, in 2 years, I may say people are tired of listening to me. I hope that's not the case, but who knows, but you don't know unless you try. And that was something that I really wanted to explore. And so for you, it may be, I'm looking to eventually open a storefront. How does that look? What do those costs look like? What do that employment look like? What kind of help does that look like? How do I get from where I am to there? And then some people are saying, well, I have a client right now. He's, in his 60s and he's saying, I've led this really full life. And I think that I want to start wrapping this up. I need to put down some succession planning and I need to put down some policies and procedures to ensure that I have something that is not just in my head, but something that I can sell or pass down to or do something to get this from where it is to me to transition into somebody else. So really having the ability to sit down in a calm, and I swear this is like the key. You have to be calm and not in a sense of urgency when you're doing these types of evaluations. If your sole driver is, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to make rent next week or next month, that is not a good place to be doing these long-term planning. So really coming from a point of, what am I looking for personally? What fulfills me? Where do I see myself? What do my goals look like? And then just knowing that those goals are probably going to change, but having that regular conversation with yourself of, I left secure job X to start very unsecure job here and now. Why did I do that? What was I looking for? And really respecting yourself and your path to stay true to why you started. And that is life-changing as far as an entrepreneur is concerned, because you will continue to create and you will continue to thrive in this environment that you've built and you're so proud of. And it's just a thoughtful way to ensure that you are living the best life you can, because the better you feel about what you're doing, the more your clients feel that. Your clients can feel if you're, stressed or you're not providing the services that you set out to do. That there's so much power in being confident and secure and happy in what you're doing. And that's really what's going to set you apart from your peers. I mean, that's what sets me apart, is my stellar, shining personality. But all jokes aside, seriously, how I'm able to explain things that are insanely technical, very scary, in a way that's very approachable. I want you to feel like we're having a coffee together or a cocktail together. and as a friend. And I want you to feel like I have your best interest in mind, because that's honestly how I approach everything. And so you just have to find what makes you tick like that. What would you be proud of, and consistently strive to that. So that, I think, is really the backbone of how we go from just starting out. So taking everything you can get to really putting in place some framework to say, this is the company, this is the business I'm looking to build. Putting in, a process to ensure that the people who you're spending your time with, the people who are your clients, are the people who are indeed who you want to be with. So identifying the characteristics or the industries or the traits or whatever it may be that defines the people that you would want to be working with. And then really honing in your process that you have with them, right? So I have an onboarding kit. Once you start with me, you get this whole beautiful document, which is like, this is where you go to your portal. This is the time frame that you're looking for. This are the deliverables that I need from you. These are X, these are Y. This is what happens when we wrap it up. These are the additional things that you may not know you need, but you probably do. So here's a list of them. And really, the more you can do from that perspective, you keep everything kind of moving in the right direction, and it works better for your clients, and it works better for you. And things like, I'm able to volunteer in my daughter's kindergarten class, and I sit on the floor and I cut construction paper with scissors with rounded tips, and it makes me really happy. And knowing that I can do that, if I have to work at 8:30 at night when I put them to bed, for some reason in my brain, that just feels better, because I'm not receiving any sort of shame around going to kindergarten. But I know that the alternative to that is I sometimes have to work late, and it's my decision, and I have the power around that, whether it's real or perceived. And that makes me really happy. So really sit down and identify what makes you happy, and how do you get there, and find a mentor. Sometimes that's the key, or find a group of people who have similar drive to you. I get a lot of people who don't understand why the heck I do everything I do. And I have to remind myself consistently, if I'm not aspiring to be this person, why am I taking their criticism? Because there is a lot of criticism in what we do. There's a lot of people who don't understand why the heck we would possibly do any of these things. So really find your dream business, find your crowd, find the crew that you need to be around. And these things and these self-evaluations are really, really going to change your life, and they're going to change the way you do business. And they're going to make sure that you're consistently on the path that is best for whatever season you are in your life, and in your business, and in your family, and just in your everything. So I hope this was super helpful. I love all the feedback that I've been getting from you guys, different questions from different episodes we've been having. I will try to address as many of them as possible. So keep the questions coming. I will absolutely try to squeeze them all in. But thanks again for joining me today. You can find me on Apple Podcasts. You can find me on Spotify, or anywhere else you enjoy your shows.